Sean Harvey, Jamie Lance, hello, and welcome.
Hi.
Just getting stuff online right now. I want to, what am I doing? I am getting, just going to wait for a couple of minutes if anybody's on their way wanting to join us.
Yeah.
It's a little warm in here. 1 second. Well, here we are. Been looking forward to dropping in with you, Helen. I'm going to practice like looking at the camera instead of at you. Yeah, it's really good to have this opportunity to chat to you about the work that you're doing around leadership and authority and kind of that mirror element of like what's landed with me about your work is just that like that you call it the like holographic element of what is within is without, or it's what we see, or it's what we filter for, and that kind of interdependent relationship between my inner reality and externally, especially through leadership, especially through how we relate to authority, others and ours.
It's great to be here. We had a chat last week, and it was exciting. It was very exciting for me to hear about your background, especially in shipping and the many bosses you must have had through that time. And also, I think you similarly work, maybe not explicitly, but like you work from the inside out in terms of from the physical. You work with men and at all levels, and that's very much part of my work, is that there are all these fractals of ourselves, and we'll see the same patterns at each fractal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel we were just chatting before the call just briefly, and just thinking about the bosses, thinking about the ways that people in my life, especially men, have wielded their power, have wielded their authority, and just really looking at how I relate to that. That's some of what I've been writing about on my Substack. And yeah, one of the things that we want to just touch on today, I want to kind of introduce you in a moment. But yeah, like what's coming through around leadership. You talk about this idea of new leadership and what's required for that, and what does that look like? What does that feel like? From all angles. I just really want to drop into that today. I want to read your bio first, just so some people have some context on you. Helen Mossiman-Kogan, is that how I say that?
Yep.
Helen Mossiman-Kogan grew up immersed in her father Sam Kogan's work on the mechanics of consciousness, work that evolved through his development of a groundbreaking acting technique. She then went on to test it through a PhD in behavioral neuropharmacology, shamanic training, and travel across 6 continents. Extensive plant medicine work as well. For the last 2 decades, she's been distilling all of it into the approach she calls holographic transformation, frameworks for understanding how consciousness operates from the inside of a single mind to the architecture of civilizations. She writes Leaders as Reality Architects on Substack, which I am subscribed to, and I read every post that comes through, and it's really, really good work. So welcome, Helen. So glad to get to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, on that last point, from inside one's mind, all the way up to the civilization. I was thinking about that today in terms of bosses, because there is ourselves and there is our relationship with ourselves and our own authority, which maybe we can come to later in the discussion. But a really simple way of seeing how the fractal works is, yes, we all have bosses and we've had bosses at work. And a lot of that, a lot of what we attract and a lot of our experiences uh, that we have come from our early life experiences of bosses, and our first bosses being our parents and teachers. And so, what we're often seeing replicated in different angles, but usually the same thing, is a variation on one of our parents, or if we had prolific teachers in our childhood, or there was a certain system of learning that we grew up in. We'll often see that. Or we can even see like a ripple from, let's say, people grew up in particular states where there was a certain state, a certain political system that really influenced how they saw authority. I mean, it doesn't have to be as harsh as like North Korea. It can be other places, but it still influenced how we view view authority, and then what we create as our experience of authority figures. So going back to this fractal nature, one way we also see the boss that we wish we I can't remember the name of our talk, the boss we hoped we would never be, or the boss that we thought we would never be, very simply usually comes out with children. And when we say things that we said, I will never say what my parents said to me, and then we hear ourselves saying it. That is the best example of being the boss we never wanted to be.
Yeah.
But I think it also shows up at another level, can also show up, again, it doesn't have to be particularly with authority figures, but even in one-to-one conversations, it can very easily, just even with peers, we can go into one person feeling more superior in the conversation and one person feeling more inferior. It might depend on what we're talking about. So one person might feel, I know more about this, and so they instantly become the more superior. And then the way that they speak can change because they're now speaking down
Right.
a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we have an authority figure and then the underling. So it really shows up across all relationships. Yeah, as I say, we can come to the relationship with ourselves, but it's fascinating. The I Ching goes into it in quite a lot of detail because it teaches so much about leadership, and it really teaches about these nuances to how we behave with others and how we relate.
I'm curious, is there a difference between power and authority? And if so, like, what does that look like? Are those synonymous, or?
Yeah, to me, they're very different. The best example comes from the authority that the one that's closest to me is, let's say, the authority of my higher mind. So when we have connection to our higher selves, there's this real pure version of authority that we never experienced before. And we recognize it's guiding us and it's teaching us, but it never does it from a place of power. And the closer that connection develops, we recognize there's unconditional love in this authority that is within, if we can tune into it at that level. Some people, as they're developing this connection with their higher selves, may find that they project onto their higher selves this demanding boss. So it's still not a pure connection. It's still a projection of, let's say, the parental figures or the teachers they had, but they're then projecting it onto their higher selves, onto spirit, whatever you want to call it. So to me, that's the purest form of authority, of my authority, and what is authority. And I recognize that never needs power. And so from that, I can learn we don't need power to be authority.
Is that, yeah, I just want to also just acknowledge that, like, that the essence of authority is like this felt sense in the body of like my highest self, or my deepest knowing, that is without uh it's without power. And I just kind of want to tease that apart, because I just feel like it's kind of not even tangential, but like parallel to this conversation. When you talk about power, are you coming from a place of like power is not a good thing, power is a bad thing, it's something we should avoid, move toward, share? Like, what is the relationship of power in this framework that you're talking about?
I think you touched on the word knowing. It's the sense of knowing that gives us, let's say, if you work with chakras, it's the solar plexus, this sense of knowing who I am. And that feels like a power, and that is our power center. And then what's become distorted over time is we now have power over and power under. So people, and then we go back to inferior and superior, so that when we're not equals, but I have to be up here for you to be down there. And if I'm down here, I can manipulate you being up there. But the power of knowing, and that is something that, especially at this time, I don't think in our younger years we have. It's something that we develop. We develop through experience. We develop through trial and error and mistakes, through understanding ourselves, through understanding ourselves as separate from our family, from our culture, to find this is the whole search for who am I? And then bit by bit, we start to go, oh, I have a sense of who I am. And with that, there's a sense of power, but it's just the sense of knowing of oneself as opposed to needing to impose that onto other people.
Got it.
That's my perspective on it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Just like that feeling of power within, like that knowing, which is, you know, separate from the authority, but it's speaking to that same essence of like when I'm in my power, when I know myself, I have access to like that authority of the higher mind, as you spoke about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really crucial part of self-development at this time, is using our experiences with authority figures external to us to understand, therefore, if it's all a reflection, if it's all fractal, therefore, what does that say about my relationship to my own authority? Because I think that's the crucial one to develop. And we can use those mirrors to understand, like as a barometer of how we're doing, or just what that relationship looks like.
Yeah. I'm curious, like a lot of what I try to do is like try to take like the things that are in my brain, these very like intellectual concepts, and kind of like land them in the body and like these like in the ways that we can practically apply them.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm curious about for anybody who's watching, maybe y'all have experienced some sort of relationship to authority or your own power or other people's power, feeling inferior or superior. And what I'm curious about, Helen, is um, like where does somebody start with this? Like where does somebody like going through their life, they're experiencing maybe similar patterns of some relationship to authority, to bosses, you know, like maybe they're aware that, you know, their parents showed up in a certain way, and there's that history. Like what does it look like to like bring a shift to that, or even like to want to change that? Where does somebody start? Is it with just reading and understanding and going and looking for different types of leadership? Like where does somebody engage that path?
In my view and experience, the only time people want to change it is when they've had enough of it. Or that they recognize is simply it's been a pattern, it goes wherever I go, so it must be something to do with me. And that's a huge turning point, because then then we're looking at, okay, it's my consciousness that is projecting and creating my reality. And that's when we switch from blame, because blame always keeps other people as separate. It keeps the bosses separate and out there. But as soon as we recognize that it must be coming from within, then it's a 180-degree shift. And then we recognize my whole world is being generated from me, from my field, from my past, from my history.
Mm.
Okay, so all the work will have to be done within. Then, when we're ready for that, and then we leave the bosses alone and whatever we've attracted and whatever experiences we've attracted. And it's usually to go within and to really seek out what those early childhood scenarios where the charge first got established. And it may not be just early childhood scenarios. It can be something that's in the family. Let's say the family grew up within a certain regime where they felt they were tortured, or whatever experience was there. My point is that it doesn't necessarily get limited to our childhood, it goes back generations. And then when we're prepared to do that work, we show up in the world kind of more curious as to what is the next authority figure going to show me about myself, as opposed to it's the blame and why do they keep doing this to me and it's so unfair, because that just keeps in my opinion, keeps the solution further and further apart from us.
Totally. Yeah, one thing that I think about, you know, I'm living in the US right now. I think you're in Switzerland. Um,
Yeah.
the 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 political leaders right now, President Trump, like we're seeing a version of authority. We're seeing a version of power right now that is having an impact. It's having a rather large impact on a lot of people. There's just a lot of like top down authority. And one thing that I think about right now, there's a couple of young men in their 20s commenting on a post that I made yesterday, just saying like, where's the like what we need is guidance. What we need is advice to help like hone our moral judgment and our perceptions of what's right. And I have a 4-year-old son. I'm thinking about him growing up into the world that I don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years, 20 years as he becomes an adult. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what can we do? And you're kind of like getting to this, but you know, for any parents who are here or watching this later, like what can parents do as they're raising their children to kind of like model the type of awareness, the type of pivot points, the type of shift for their children? Like how can we model leadership in a good way for the next generation, whether they're our children or just, you know, young people in the world?
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm preparing a post for next week, which is talking about like what comes next. Like, how do we know what comes next if we've never been there? How do we model what we've never seen? And I think it's a great point. In my experience and the way that I've learned this, really, I learned this largely, I think, through Ayurveda. It's also the quote from Michelangelo. It's my advice to parents would be, the greatest thing you can do is to be mindful of not repeating what your parents did. So just to keep removing what has been imposed upon your consciousness, and then what's underneath will just naturally come through. You don't have to think of how it should look or how it should be, because it will just naturally come out. And also to not have any fear that you're giving wrong impressions to your children or you're giving wrong examples, because everything they're experiencing is what they need to be experiencing. You don't need to be the perfect parent. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. They come in for whatever you're going to show them, however much you get it wrong, however much you get it right. They're in for the whole thing. So to remove the pressure that it needs to be perfect, but to trust, just being mindful of the things that have triggered us, that have been a charge on us, being mindful of those things, finding ways to do that differently, and just another way will naturally come through, as opposed to prescribing what that looks like.
Yeah,
It's really trusting the spontaneity that's built into our beings.
Yeah, it's so hard to say like this is what the experience is going to be for this particular person, right? Like trusting the Hakomi therapy calls it the organic unfolding, like trusting that the spontaneous movement of human psyche, unimposed or unobligated, is toward healing, is toward wholeness, is toward center, toward love.
Yeah.
And so with that, for me, that's kind of like that just gets me curious about like the more personal. And of course, you don't have to, you can answer this in however way you want, but I'm wondering if you're willing to bring in a personal example for you of like, can you tell me about a moment that you really had a moment with your relationship to authority or power, like some pivot point that you reached? Like, was there a point where you realized that you had enough and something needs to change? And what did that feel like in your body? What did that feel like in the relationships that was affecting? How did that unfold into your life?
I might be going back to your last point slightly, because there's a memory that came to mind as you were just speaking, which was when I had a very first kind of deep Ayurvedic purification. Panchakarma is the name of the purification process in Ayurveda. Yeah, and I'd gone through that, and kind of the world as I knew it had just collapsed. Everything that I thought about myself, thought about my parents, it was all just falling away. And I remember saying to the doctor, so who will I be if I don't have those things? Who am I if not that? And he said exactly what you were referring to, that it will just naturally show up who you are. And I had been so attached, as we all are, to the systems that we had I had grown up in, and to believing what I believed about the world and how it was constructed. And then there's this great fear that if it's taken away, I won't know how to think. I literally said, I won't know how to think. Yeah. And but then it's just remove. It's like the point. The reason I refer to Michelangelo. It's just removing what is not David. You know, the famous quote
From
about creating
from this
David. Yeah,
culture.
from the sculpture David. So when you remove what is not Helen, because this stuff really isn't me. It belonged to parents. It belonged to their childhood. It belonged to all of that. When that goes, then you're actually tuning into more of you, and then it becomes really interesting to find out who you are. So who am I without that in this situation? So how do I choose to hold myself walking down the street? Which restaurant do I choose to go into now? What do I decide to eat now? What do I decide to wear now? And there's, it's actually thrilling. It's just like incredibly exciting to like own yourself after you've just got rid of so much that wasn't you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really reminds me. I was just watching a thing this morning. It's a beautiful poet. I think he's Australian, and he was talking about um, the women going into menopause. He was kind of mansplaining menopause to men and husbands, and he was he was using the metaphor of the caterpillar going into the cocoon, and literally this dissolution has to happen, just like what you're talking about, where just everything that was the caterpillar needs to dissolve. Like there's the seed of what's new or what's coming or that unfolding within it, but that information can only get activated once the dissolution, once it's cocoon
Yeah.
soup. you know
Yeah.
and that just really like reminds me of like sometimes that dissolving, sometimes that disintegration, sometimes that losing needs to happen in order to make space for the
Yeah.
next thing.
Yeah.
um, what I get curious about is like what did that look like for you as you reached that point of like, who am I, what do I do, who is this? Like what were a couple of the steps along the way that kind of like brought you back into, or not even brought you back, but brought you more into yourself or your um, higher
Yeah.
mind?
I think I've been in that place ever since.
Really?
Yeah, and I think every day is who am I today?
Wow.
Yeah, and then it becomes, so how am I going to react to this? How am I going to show up to this? Because you realize as soon as I call them, in my approach, I call it mind erosions. We kind of get set in who we are. We get set and attached to our identity. This is me, and this is how I do things, and this is who I am. But really, that's all very external. It's all very personality. But
Mhm.
when we tune into, and that's what I like about the name of your publication, when we tune into the part of us that doesn't change, and that becomes our identity, then everything else is just costumes and sets and settings for our evolutionary process. But when we really know that part of us that doesn't change, our soul, our higher self, they're all constructs to describe the same thing, and we identify with that, then it's just constantly in flux. And I see it like David Bohm call it hollow movement. So it's not even hologram, but it's just constantly being influenced by the inputs that are coming in, by the things that we're shedding, by the reflections that we've had. And it's just constantly, who am I now? Who am I now? Who am I now? I mean,
Yeah.
there is, to get to that point, there are some things that are stable underneath it, like my name is my name, my birthday is my birthday, I'm married and I live here, and that degree of stability, which you could say is the masculine aspect, it gives me the structure. It gives the structure for everything else, well, the other aspects, to be in flux and to constantly be changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, how can we relax um, kind of into the Tao, into the
Yeah.
movement of life, and rely on the helpful structures that keep us afloat, or keep us the banks to the river, if you will, the masculine. um,
Yeah.
but really, I loved what you said about, I'm still in that process. I'm still, how do I want to respond to this? Who am I today? Who is the person choosing where I'm going today, or what I'm putting my energy toward? um,
Yeah.
I feel like that's
Yeah.
powerful work. Takes a lot of
Yeah.
humility. It takes a lot of awareness of your own patterns and your own ego, and
constantly. And
Yeah,
I think it helps with relationships, maybe, but because I think all relationships, even before I was married, but in doing that with oneself, then you also do it with other people. There's no expectation on who they are today. I know who they were. Because we have a tendency to say, "Oh, my mum was always like this, my sister's always like this, or the
yeah,
postman always responds like this." But
yeah,
when you say, I don't know who I am today, I don't know who they're going to show up as today. Let me see who they are today and how I respond to who they are today with who I am today. And then let's see what happens.
yeah. Yeah, we can give each other more spaciousness. We can give each other more
Yeah.
grace to change. You know, like
Yeah.
the identities and the stories are helpful and they help us feel good and orient sometimes. But when we get stuck in them, or when we like keep people from keep our relationships from being able to change because we need to keep somebody in that groove. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
can
Yeah. I think it's a teaching from medicine, plant medicine, very much so. Like from yes, from Ayurveda, Panchakarma, but also ayahuasca. Like some of those things that blow you apart. You realize they're not just to blow you apart for that one evening. They're teaching us something. Don't know if you know Bashar, who's channeled by Darryl Anka. Yeah,
yeah,
he says, they're there to give you the lessons. And once you've got the lessons and you've incorporated them, you don't need to go back. And the lesson is, it's always asking, who are you? And keep dying to yourself and keep dying to yourself and keep dying to what you think is real. And then, but it brings a great freshness to life, and it allows us to be more of an observer. Yes,
yeah,
there are still challenges. And then we see how do I approach that challenge today? How am I going to, how will I feel about it tomorrow? How will I feel about it after a cup of tea? Who will I be then?
yeah. Yeah, and for me, just in my understanding and lens, like I just hear the word agency, like self agency. There's more ability to be connected to the self, more connected to my relationships, and there's enough space to respond instead of to react, and to really
Yeah.
consider how I want to respond to something or how I want to show up in a certain way. Um,
Yeah.
and for me, that kind of ties directly back to authority. A lot of the bosses that
Mhm.
I've had in my commercial fishing career, for example, like there wasn't a lot of space for me to be autonomous in that context, because there's a job to be done and there's very limited. I remember one moment when my boss came to my most intense, like highline, like very intense human, and he knew how to work people. He knew how to like get under people's skin in order to like help them produce more or get them to produce more. I was in my bunk. I was supposed to be sleeping for we had 45 minutes to take a nap or something. And I was journaling. I was writing. I had my little tiny light on, and he came in and he said, just the worst. He was like, "I pay you to sleep." And I was just like, well, what if this is more nourishing for me? What if this is more, what if this is more helpful? And there were all these ways that I was just like kind of like pushing back, against that, because it was just too much. I was like, and what I imagine, and I want to like kind of get into this, like, what does grounded leadership feel like? What does it feel like when we're being led in a good way by somebody who is connected, is tuned in? Like, what are the traits? What are the signals that we can have in our body when we're interacting with a boss, interacting with somebody who has authority, even ourselves? What are the signals we can look out for, um,
Mm.
that would kind of help us discern, like, what, I don't know, what is more helpful leadership, or what is more,
Mm.
is that making sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It's bringing to mind a paradox, especially when you say the word agency. And I think it's right. There's agency, which implies there's a sense of self, myself, that's separate from you. But at the same time, I'm saying that you are me. Yeah. And it's a really interesting, I find that along the way, because we all know we're all connected and we all ultimately we know we're all one. But in the expression of that, and expression of that as a leader, ironically, it involves having very clear boundaries. So it's as much as knowing we're all one, but it's also in knowing where I am one and you are uniquely you.
Hmm.
So to your question, I think there's more of a process to getting to that place where we can recognize the markers of a good authority figure, because I think there's a journey for all of us in recognizing how we have belonged with peers, belonged with others previously, and deconstructing that, like the caterpillar inside. It has to all go into a soup. How we've done things before has to all go into a soup and then get reconstructed in a way where we recognize I'm sovereign, you're sovereign. Even if you work for me, you are no less than me. You are equal to me. What I do depends on you. What you do depends on me. We're doing this together. The only reason I may be the boss is I maybe had, excuse me, more experience, or I've been doing this longer, but that's the only reason. But otherwise, we are equals, and we're doing this together with a shared vision. So
Yeah.
also then reconstructs what we thought about jobs. Like, many people don't go into jobs because they love the vision. Some people do, but not always. But when we recognize we're coming together because we want to do something together and we have a shared purpose, then we respect what each person brings to the table. And it doesn't need to be power over. There is a mutual respect for, even if the person has less experience, wherever they're at is exactly where they need to be for where we're going.
Mhm.
And it is, yeah, the paradox of, we're individuals and we are one, and you are me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just being in that soup, being in the discernment of that, but also being in the um, yeah, is such a task sometimes to
Mm.
yeah, I'm thinking of a dynamic I'm in right now with my men's group of how um, I'm kind of stepping in as a leader figure. I brought the group together. That triggered somebody in the group who has authority stuff, who has leadership stuff. He voiced that he didn't really want it to happen in that way.
Mhm.
Um, and yesterday I was having coffee with him, and he just shared with me. He's like, I respect you, I love you, I trust you, and I didn't feel heard in that moment because I said that thing, and that thing happened anyway without really checking in. And he's like, that's a piece that I really wanted to offer you, is like that happened, and it felt a little bit like taking,
Mhm.
and it felt so valuable for me to hear that, because we're in this container, this men's group container, where like we're all separate iterations, but like that sense of interconnectedness is definitely there. Um, but learning how, like where, what are the trip lines? Um, what are the little ways that we can do better in a moment? Um,
Mm.
yeah, I can just feel that part even getting rewired, like in the wake of that conversation. Um, yeah, feeling into that discernment.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier in the call, we were talking about parenting
Mm.
and really becoming more aware of the things that we don't, the things that are alive in us that we don't want to pass down necessarily.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, are there things, or what have been things that have shown up for you that have shown up in your life or relationships that you don't want to pass forward, and how did you work with that?
I think a large thing that my parents are Soviet Jews, so they were Jews in the Soviet Union. They left in 1973, so they had a lot of inferiority and a lot of fear growing up in that system, living in that system. And I saw that, even though I never knew that world, I saw that even growing up in London, England. I saw that inferiority, I saw the fear, and I saw the paranoia.
Hmm.
And I saw the ways that it showed up. And then over many years and still continuously. I remember the first time I put a website together and I had what I thought were really not really outrageous ideas, but ideas not many people were talking about. And it took me a week of of sweating it out before I could press publish, because had these fears that had just come down the line. And then similarly over the years, different forms of communication. What will people say? I'm saying something that's a bit, it's not mainstream. It may be controversial. It may be viewed this way. Maybe, but just keep pushing through and to keep challenging myself and to keep doing it anyway and to keep building on each experience. So I'd say that's been the main. It hasn't been so much the dominating. It's been more of the victim
Yeah.
and to work with that now.
Yeah, and the
Mm.
vulnerability of like putting yourself out there, of like
Yeah,
publishing like your views and making that available for
yeah,
anybody to see. Like that's an
yeah,
incredibly. I feel like that's not fully appreciated. Maybe it's felt. I feel it, but being on Substack, being on Instagram, just being out there and like putting out our world kind of as a social norm. But the vulnerability of that is, especially if you're coming from that kind of template, that kind of like victim template where you're being hyper vigilant, like being out there could mean big risks, it could mean death even. um, it's brave work. It's really, it takes a lot to push through that.
yeah. I think we all have our own version. Um, yeah, I think that's what I think. I'm not sure life's worth living if we don't have something to be working with. To me, that's evolution. That's why we're here. That I don't necessarily think it's supposed to be a cruise. It's supposed to be, we're going through extraordinary metamorphosis, and the only way we're going to do that is through the discomfort of being squelched from a caterpillar into soup to become a butterfly, and neither that nor menopause is easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I feel like there are a number of people on the planet who are actively engaged on that, and some people come to that at different points in their life,
Mm,
whether biological or by circumstance.
yeah,
Um, I'm one of those people who like chooses the hard path, or the path of continual change and transformation. And I've also known people who just didn't need to engage that. Like one person was like, uh, they're like, I got a recess life. You know, I had a good childhood. It was fine. Everything's pretty good. I'm good with talking about shallow topics and drinking on the weekends and watching Netflix, and that's the life.
yeah.
And sometimes I'm jealous of that. you know, but I wouldn't trade it. You know,
No.
because the shifts and change, kind of this like slow, sometimes quick, evolutionary path that I've been on has been really potent and powerful, and it's brought amazing uh, humans into my life, and I get to chat to people like you who have like been on that path for even longer and really
Likewise.
begin to understand it in a comprehensible way.
Yeah. But you don't know if that person who's comfortable, we don't know what's coming. Like, you don't know if you've gone through this earlier because friends like that in 10, 20 years will go, it's all just hit the fan. So that's, and because it's all a hologram, some people are seeing, I remember that maybe we talked about this last week, but I remember talking to some people going, it's a huge change on the planet. It's all undergoing change. Can you see? And other people, these people just playing golf on Saturday, like they played golf every Saturday. I had no idea what I was talking about. They were kind of in a different version of the world.
Yeah.
Um, but we are all fractals and we are all connected. So something's got to be. There are also parts of, I'm sure there are also parts of your life. There are parts of my life where I just lounge on the sofa and I just watch Netflix. So I do have a glimpse into that world. And I'm sure there'll be times when they'll have a glimpse. It may not need to be what it has been, for example, for you, for me. But we each have our own roles and we're all contributing in our own way. But
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, and just remembering that like there's not a destination that I think the world or evolution or the planet or civilization is trying to get to, right? We're just constantly iterating and experimenting. Evolution's like, let's try this human thing and see how it goes. Oh, like this is what happens when we when we do that. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, just that idea of some like utopia where everybody's happy and has a universal basic income, and we're all just content, like that, for and playing golf on Saturdays because there's nothing more, there's no heartbreaking thing to pay attention to. Like um, some people live in that world, and I feel like whatever transformation is happening is going to affect some of us more than it's going to affect others. Um, yeah, and that just like for me, that's just like a invitation to like pay more attention to like what's happening in the body, like what's happening in my lived experience. Because that's what I have. That's what any of us has, you know, as we're on this planet for 70, 80, 90 years, hopefully. Um, you know, and to pay attention to like the things that we're building, to pay attention to the things that we want to leave as legacy, if you will,
Mm.
can look different from human to human. I think I want to leave a different planet than other men do. Yeah, but just really learning to value that felt like sensory experience of being alive and what that
Yeah.
is. And maybe it's more intense in some phases of life, and maybe it's more of a recess in others. But again, like you said, we don't know what's coming for anybody.
No. And it's interesting, everyone that comes into our life. There was a woman here helping today, and she was helping with cleaning, and she has a severely autistic son, and she tells me every week about how difficult her life is, and it all revolves around him. And from the outside, her husband is a builder and she does cleaning, and her mother helps her with her son. And it can, from the outside, look like a relatively normal family. If other than that she's dealing with her son, I think maybe her daughter as well. But when you look into anyone's life, I don't think anything is so. There is no normal.
Yeah,
The deeper you go, or it's just relative. Like some people have terrible tragedy take place, terrible abuse take place in their life. And then I always remember there was a girl at school, we were housemates, and I remember her telling me about the time that her mother placed her favorite toy elephant in the jumble sale without asking her. And she went to the jumble sale with a friend and she saw her favorite toy elephant there. And the degree of tragedy that she had around that elephant being taken by her mum and given up for sale was relatively the same as other people's tragedy, where it's something more abusive. To her, that wasn't abuse.
yeah,
And so it's hard to compare across lives. Hard to compare people and their paths, especially the deeper you go with any individual, the more you see, yes, there's their life, and then there's their family, and then there's their family history, and then the ancestry. But then if you go into past lives and all of the different inputs, and then the karma, these strange things that show up in our lives, you go, this doesn't happen to anyone, why is this happening to me? And you kind of go, this must be something karmic or from another time, because it doesn't make sense that this is showing up for me, and it makes no sense for my family, no one else is experiencing it. And then you start to see the whole universe that we are, containing all of these different things that we're needing to play out and resolve and experience and attract.
yeah,
You go, wow, this is just me. Everyone else is walking around with this, with their version of it, to whichever scale, whichever volume, whichever brightness that they're experiencing it. And then it just it changes your experience of life, who you are and who you're attracting in, and how these interactions take place, and what they pass on to you and what you pass on to them. Um, yeah, it's fascinating.
yeah. That is such a valuable perspective because it allows that spaciousness, it allows that agency, it allows um, the choice to happen. Um, Specifically, like what's here is happening for my awakening. Whatever's happening is happening for my evolution and growth and all the things. And what I've found personally, I'm curious what you think about this, is I can't like that's for me, that I can't project that perspective onto anyone else, because as soon as I do that, as soon as I say, oh, this is happening for your benefit, and I think of people in Gaza. I think of people in Sudan who've been displaced by civil war. I think about any number of people on the planet who are being severely impacted now by forces that are so far outside of them. I can't be like, oh, this is happening for your awakening, right? What a privileged, like narcissistic thing to say for me. Um, but when I look at it from my perspective, and I can face into adversity, I can face into what happens to me, and to your point about the toy and the, what did you say, the
Oh,
rum.
I did. Yeah, I don't
rummage.
know if it's an American thing. It's an American thing. In England, a jumble sale is maybe like where you bring things you no longer want and sell them onto. You might call it
Like
like a
a yard
garage
sale.
sale, yard sale, like a yard sale, but a
Yeah.
large one. Like the whole neighborhood brings everything,
Yeah,
brings something. Yeah,
and that just reminds me how, like, trauma isn't what happens, right? Like when we talk about the severity of trauma, it's not the event or the thing, the person doing the thing, right? It's how we react, how we respond, the strategies that we use to survive in those moments, especially when it's happening early. And it's how we carry that information forward, how we relate to that event. That
absolutely.
is the trauma. It's the constant stress response or the continued stress response. And to just make a little bit of spaciousness for like the variety, the wide, massively, like an infinite number of
Yeah,
um, experiences that people have and the relativity that we have to adversity. Like sometimes my favorite toy, I can imagine my child, his favorite toy being put, like taken away from him. That might be a really, really big deal. And for other kids, it would be, that's life, you know? Um, and so, yeah, just making space for the variety of experiences that we have and how we carry those forward, how we can be aware of those when that pattern shows up later in life, and how can we shift those things later in
yeah,
life, so that that same pattern when I was 4 isn't happening when I'm 34 or
yeah,
44.
yeah. You used a great word, spaciousness. It's having the time, it's having the space, it's giving other people the distance as well. We've now, unfortunately, well, I think unfortunately from my experience, we clutter up so much of our time that we don't give any spaciousness. We just fill it and fill it and fill it. And so we don't often have the time to reflect, the time to give other people space, to acknowledge that even the people closest to us, even like my mother or my husband, they have their own universe going on, and they have their own perspective that I can never convince them of mine. They have theirs, and there's the one that's supposed to have, that's supposed to trigger me in the way that it's supposed to trigger me for whatever I'm supposed to resolve. And it all needs space. But when we put pressure on it and when we grasp at it and when we have expectations on it, we had a note exchange about expectation, it all starts to shrink and get tight, and it becomes unbearable because we feel like our lives depend on how other people will react. And that's a scary place to live because then your life is not your own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to that. I can relate to that.
Yeah. So slowing down is one of the number one things that I recommend, slowing down in everything. And it's only speeding up. So it takes extra effort and extra attention to put distance between ourselves and the next thing I have to do and the next place and the next scroll and the next comment and the next thing. And to
Yeah,
think we need it now more than ever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I was speaking about this in a post I did for Republic of Letters a few days ago, and that fear, that anxiety that comes up, where if I don't keep up, then I'm going to be left behind. If I don't get rich now, AI is going to, like complete, like I'm going to be forever poor. I'm never like success is not possible for me. Like the anxiety that produces, like that's some of that additional resistance to what it takes to slow down, what it takes to just like take a pause and be like, wait, I'm here, I'm okay. Like, this breath that I'm taking right now is, whether you want to see it as a productivity hack or just like a net benefit, whatever the frame is, like, I don't think that there's, I think that there are probably very, very few situations where slowing down won't help. And I can't think of the other
Yeah.
ones. I'm just making some space for
Yeah.
them. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
have thought,
oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh no, I think the only time slowing down is more when we're losing ourselves, zoning out. There's something in the taking the time to just be with how I feel, of taking the time to give oneself space, because it's an act of self-respect, it's an act of self-love. And when we miss that, we stop giving that to ourselves, and then we start wanting it from someone else. We start wanting it in the number of followers. We start wanting it from elsewhere, and we've lost it already. We think it's going to come from out there, as opposed to taking the time to give it to ourselves and go, they can do whatever they want. If they show up, we're in resonance. If they don't, that's fine. I
Yeah.
just keep doing it. And I think that's really essential at this time as well. That we
Yeah.
finding these ways to keep learning how to love ourselves, and that it's not dependent on anything outside of ourselves.
100%.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have 9 minutes left. I just wanted to create in the hour-long container. I just wanted to invite anybody who's watching, if you have questions, if you want to pipe in, if you have thoughts that you want to share, totally open to hearing them. You can ask Helen direct questions, or both of us, or just wanted to make that invitation clear for everyone who's listening and watching. All of this makes me curious too. What are the things that you're working on now around all of this? And I know you're writing books and you're running the gathering, and I want to hear more about the 20-week gathering that you just announced. But I'm curious, what's the leading edge of your personal work, especially around authority and what we've been talking about today?
At the moment, I got sucked into this series that I'm writing, that I feel like the next one's coming out in just over a week, the week after Easter. I'm just preparing that. But I started this series about civilizations. And it's something I had wanted to write about for decades, even in my father's work, which is all about the actor and the actor's thinking. And then it goes into the individual. But years ago, I remember him saying to me that the consciousness of the citizens of a country can only ever be as clear as the consciousness of the leader of that country. Sorry to say that. Yeah. In that we are so influenced by all of their decisions, they are in charge. We've gotten so used to it that we don't question it. That's part of what I was saying about, yes, there are more extreme states that people grow up in, like my parents in communist Russia, but even relatively free states, or growing up in England, there was a lot of thinking that I took on board that I still had to dismantle, that was just from society, in the 70s and the early 80s. Anyway, so I remember him saying that to me years and years ago. And in recent years, I've been very interested in the rise and fall of civilizations. So, what is it in the thinking that makes it grow? What is it the turning point, and then it subsides?
Mhm.
So, the series that I've written, I think there are 4, will be 5 posts on this. That seems to be the edge that I'm personally at the moment. That I want to write these because they are the thinking of the trilogy that I'm also putting together. It's kind of the third book, is like, so where is all of this going? How are we going to use everything we know about consciousness? Because there's a whole framework into how we think, why we think the way we do, and how we think, and how can we use that as we step into the unknown, and as we step into an age of higher consciousness. Yes, AI, visitors from other places, who knows what's coming, but
Mhm.
what can we say are patterns that have worked across time, that have been these fluctuations, that must continue to work because they've always been there. And so that's what I'm currently looking at, and I've been doing this research, and as you know, I've been looking into Egypt in particular because of how successful the ancient Egyptian civilization was, and for how long, but also really looking at the turning points and what happens to get to the next civilization. And there is also a thread of wisdom that passes through all the civilizations, that somehow gets passed on from one thriving civilization to the next, that helps it grow. So I'm currently in that, which is simultaneously paving my trilogy. It feels like the chapter outlines going through this series, so then I can go into more detail. But it's really this question of, where are we going next? What kind of leaders do we need? Where will they come from? What kind of agency will they develop? How will they develop it? And I think just by asking, this is in my next post, but by asking the questions, we will pull in the answers. And we're also desperate to pull in the answers. So we have to keep asking questions. What is it that we want? What is it that we want to see? How is it going to happen? Just keep asking how it's going to happen. And then, as I've seen in my own experience, you keep asking the question long enough, you'll get the answer. And we want that to come into form. I know so many of us are desperate to see that come into form.
Is this one of the things you said really landed with me, the thread that follows, that kind of threads through all of those different civilizations? Is
Yeah.
that this piece that you're speaking about? Or is that is there a way that you can synopsize that, or give us a
What
taste
is
of that?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's well, I talk about it in the Egyptian piece like Mart, like there are certain elements, there is balance, the balance of light and dark, that there's constantly have to be this balance and there's constant accountability. There is an acknowledgement that as within, so without. And that's why leaders had to have such transparent consciousnesses because they knew it would all, their thinking would show up within their country, within all of the citizens, and they were knowingly responsible for that.
Mhm.
And to come into, and maybe this is to also sum up the whole conversation, is that leaders, to go into a position of leadership is to take ownership of everything that one leads and to
Mhm.
see that as oneself, and that every aspect, like the guy that came to you, is an aspect of yourself that wanted to be heard over something that you may not have been aware of. And that is constantly happening for leaders, that we have, if I was to step in as a leader of a country, I have to own all of these problems, which are problems there are, and the great things too, and to recognize it's all part of me. And if I want these things to change, I have to find them within me and transform it within me to see it transform there. So the leaders of the future need a great degree of accountability, but it's not like a personal thing. It no longer becomes personal at that stage. Like this means I'm a great person, or if I do it badly, it means I'm a bad person. It's
Yeah.
more like I just came here to do this. There is just this knowing.
Yeah.
Maybe like we were saying, like you have your path, I have mine. The cleaning lady, she has hers. Everyone, we all have our paths, and this is the path that people are born into. And it's helping people recognize that. Is there something inside that people know? I think I've just come to do this, and I've just come to allow this to work through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just comes back to, for me, like the central image of my work, and I think that there's definitely a resonance and shared um, value here, is like just our capacity to not hold. I think like a lot of people get trapped in that idea of like holding everything, but like what is our capacity to expand in order to let life move through us, right? What can we allow? Not
Allow,
just
that's the
not
word. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like not just accepting, but like really just allowing and offering the structure, the banks to the river, the masculine, whatever you want to call it, so that whatever is natural and spontaneous and the organic unfolding or whatever of life to happen, how can I step into service, um, into purpose, into however we frame that. For me, the best leaders are the ones who can do that. Like they're definitely present, they're there, sometimes they're a figurehead, but also they're an open vessel. They're like transparent in their own process, they're doing their own work to kind of transform what they see needing to happen, and they're also representing the people. They're also representing who they're leading, in the way that they're all deeply connected with one another. So, yeah, it's a really powerful
Yeah.
image for me.
Yeah. And I think to sum that up, it's the people who are prepared to get themselves out of the way to allow what wants to come through. They don't see it as a personal endeavor. They see it as what wants to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that they came there for that. I think we see it with someone like the Dalai Lama. They kind of know, I came here to do this. Okay, let's just get on with it. They don't fight it. They just like, this is it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no self doubt. There's no like
No.
questioning. It's like, yeah,
Self isn't even in the picture. It's like it's the mission, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's probably pretty apt for Good Friday coming up.
Yeah. We just have a minute or two left. How can people find you? What do you want people to know about? What's upcoming for you?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yep. Two websites, thewhiterabbitrevels.com or Helen Mossiman-Kogan, my entire name, no hyphens, .com. that's where you'll find me. That's where you'll find more information. I have a 20-week program. Thank you for reminding me. Starting 1st of May. There we talk about the power that we can learn from the goddesses, because we have so few role models of powerful feminine figures. And how do we incorporate that? But it's really not about feminine or masculine. It's really about the embodiment of both, but seeing it through female archetypes. So
Beautiful.
that's what's coming up from the 1st of May. And I have a retreat in Italy in July. And the programs and courses are ongoing. And I also have consultants who are training people who just want to step in from, if it's all very new to you, then there are places that you can start at the ground level.
Amazing.
But I'm happy to hear from anyone, especially if they've watched this, they have any questions. It's been fantastic. Thanks, Ron. The time's just flown by.
Yeah, totally. And I highly
Mm.
recommend a conversation with Helen. This has been super fun.
Okay.
So thanks for sharing. So I'm honored to get
Likewise.
to drop in with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah. Thanks, Helen. Have a great day. Night.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, folks.